Hey everyone, I want to welcome Rabbi Jacob Rupp, who's joining us from, why don't you tell us where you're joining us from?
Minneapolis, Minnesota. Thank you.
I know you're a California guy, so what brings you to Minnesota?
We had the great opportunity of working with an amazing organization called H Minnesota.
Okay.
And trust me, like it had to be pretty awesome to get us out of San Diego where we were living for about 5 years.
All right, that's awesome. How's the change in weather?
So it was pretty brutally cold, actually, no joke. And I guess this didn't actually count as a winter, but for people that never saw snow before, this was a lot of winter. But now it's actually pretty beautiful. So I never had that appreciation for spring before, believe it or not.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you're joining me from inside then. Why don't you tell everyone a little bit about about Lift Your Legacy and about your coaching and what you do?
Okay, great, sure. So I am training-wise, I started off with my career as a rabbi. I worked as a rabbi at UCLA for 8 years. I worked in San Diego. And I realized as I started to build, my family got bigger and I started to need to create more income for myself, that basically everything I found in terms of business coaching and leadership coaching, because I had the background in Judaism, I knew that it came from Judaism. And it's shocking when you hear, let's say someone like Tony Robbins say the concepts of gratitude, which are so crucial. I was like, yeah, Jews have been doing that for many, many years. So as soon as I realized that, I got really, really into coaching and consulting and starting to put the two worlds together. And what's happened since then is that I found that a lot of the basic principles of monotheism and of the ancient wisdom actually applies in the modern boardroom with the modern individual just as much as it does in the past and in the houses of worship. So I've kind of learned how to reposition a lot of the concepts that we know that I've been teaching for the modern working individual, and have been coaching in terms of basically in three areas: the way that a person relates to themselves, the way that a person relates to others, usually specifically their wives or their husbands and their families and their teams at work, and then also in terms of how do you build an organization and what does that look like?
Absolutely, I appreciate it. So you're saying all the details are there. It's just we need an interpreter, to bring it to the 21st century.
I always saw myself as a bridge. I think the bridge for me is an analogy that I resonate with deeply. That I'm not coming up with anything myself, but yeah. I just, because I've kind of dipped my toes in both waters, so to speak, that I feel privileged to be able to do that.
So what is it like to transition to become a coach? Like, I mean, like a lot of people, there are a lot of coaches out there. I know there's some skepticism around coaching, executive and leadership coaching, but how do you dispel that, and how do you how did you get into coaching? If you want to share that with everyone.
I mean, so again, I think that what's very important is that I love working with people. I think that that's fascinating. I think you're right. It's a very unregulated industry. So for people who are looking to start working with a coach, it's not so simple. And everyone's like, oh, certification, whatever it might be. Chances are your certified coaches might not have had that much training either. So I definitely believe that it's crucial for your coaches to be able to lead with value. That's someone that you have to be able to relate to on a personal level. I've worked with probably north of 5 to 7 coaches in my life. I found that 5 of those 7 were not great, but the 2 of them were. And the process of committing to investing in yourself and committing to working with the professional and having that check-in and having that accountability and just being able to have a sounding board who is uninvested in anything other than your success, I do think that that's absolutely crucial. So that's sort of what I try to do with my clients and sort of like leading with value in that regard. Is there skepticism? Absolutely. Is it the kind of thing that people think, well, how does a rabbi know, and whatever it might be? I had that in the beginning, but I feel that if a person is in line with themselves, if a person is in line with what they want in life, then you have to stop kind of paying attention to what other people say and just sort of live a life where you're so inspired and so excited about the work that you do and how you're showing up that I think the results ultimately wind up speaking for themselves. So it's just about having a little bit of that courage, I guess you can say, to kind of pursue your own path, not to listen to naysayers in the beginning because no one's going to like what you do because everyone kind of knows you're in a specific box, but then really building your own thing. And then eventually people start coming to you and asking you, hey, how'd you do that? And, having like the faith, oh, I knew you'd always have your thing. And it's like, great, thanks. But it's nice to have that.
So let's go back even further. Like, tell everyone, I mean, your story. I know you're in tip-top shape now. But I mean, I know that you also talk about, physical well-being, and and health and wellness because you had a journey as far as that goes as well, right?
You're right. I did. I grew up like many others in America, I guess, tremendously. I've lost 100 pounds in my life. I definitely had a ton of struggles with that. It's just fascinating how so many of the scripts that we have growing up, you know, for me, food was always like comfort, and we did it around the family, and we ate around the family, and whatever. What else can you say? You know, I live my life as a large person, and it's fascinating how being overweight or being obese, if we can say, impacts a person in their mindset and how they see themselves and what's available. And more than anything, and it's really fascinating that there was this dichotomy that existed. I just accepted that I was fat. And so then it's like, okay, no one's going to like me for what I look like. So therefore I have to develop my other skill set, which I hear, you know, a lot of, you know, comics and people learn that, you know, you have to stand out, you have to speak about it. I can tell you exactly. My wife, I met my wife as a freshman in college. And I was so obese at that point that she thought I was like a 30-year-old guy that worked with the organization that we met at. But then she went to Spain as I guess as an undergrad or whatever it was. And when she was in Spain, I basically told myself that she would be. Hang on, I'm just muting this. That she would be around all these skinny Spanish people. And so I started, you know, the classic diet, working out. And then, so I lost 50 pounds by the time she came back. And then about 3 or 4 years into our marriage, I lost another 50. And it's crazy how something as simple as your diet and exercise can change not only how you see yourself, but how others see you, and being able to present yourself. And again, for those that are not familiar, let's say the Orthodox Jewish world in a lot of cases doesn't classically celebrate a physically fit person. It's not that there's anything wrong with it, but I also had to kind of work through that. It's like, I'm not ashamed of the fact that I like to hit the weights. I got very into MMA and kickboxing and jujitsu later on in my life. Also, that's something I love and I'm really thrilled about. So again, it's that same theme of coming back to what do you like? What are you passionate about? And eventually you can get enough traction to actually start to see real results.
Absolutely. That's well, congratulations on doing that, and you're inspiring, because a lot of people do that and then, you know, it comes back on, or they don't have that discipline. So, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, you know, you had 7 coaches, you found 2 of those 7 that are great. Like you know, everyone always wonders, like, does my coach have a coach? Does a coach have a coach? So, I mean, do you find that you, like, you know, you're coaching others, but do you find that you need to have that check-in? You need to have that accountability. The way that I look at it is, like, my wife and I just started sleep training, you know, our 4-month-old. And, you know, if it wasn't quarantine and Corona, we might have hired an outside consultant. We're definitely being the disciplined folks. And I like to be the happy, fun daddy. I never thought that I would be like Mr. Discipline and put the baby in the crib and let's walk away and come back. But, you know, there are those consultants and sleep coaches who come in. Do you think it's a lot easier, you know, to be objective, to be an outsider? And do you think that's why so many coaches are successful? And how has that worked for you personally with your coaching?
Personally, I mean, the notion that coaches are successful, I think, is something that's kind of problematic. I think that the numbers will say that the average coach does about $30,000 a year in work, which, again, depending on where you live, certainly in New York, that's not terribly successful. But you know, I think that the idea is, and I was speaking about this, that you can sort of choose. First of all, most people, and it's shocking to find that, and I think that this is something that you always have to be very cognizant of and aware of when you are thinking about your life. Most people don't actually choose the life that they're in. They sort of bounce into one thing, the other thing, and they find themselves in jobs, in relationships, doing stuff they don't like. And it's a terrible place to be in as someone that has spent time doing things I don't like. So when you start to appreciate that maybe your life could be different, you kind of have 3 options. There's the long way, and that usually just means kind of like reading and doing stuff on your own and taking it slow. There's kind of the medium way, which is you can start to like work with other people and talk about it and everything like that. And then there's the fast way, which is basically find someone that did it. There's a basic principle that there's nothing new under the sun. So it's like and Jim Rohn talks about this, that you're like the sum of the 5 people that you hang out with, right? So you have to find people, nothing that you want to do, people haven't done before, right? There's plenty of people that started broke and became very wealthy. There are people that started fat and got skinny. There are other people that got skinny or got ripped from being skinny, or took a decent company, made it a very a huge company. So it's like you have to try to find someone that's doing what you want, that has at least the appreciation or the background of where you've come from, and then be able to work with them if you want to accelerate the time. Again, I have very big goals and dreams for sort of like my life, and I don't want to waste time, and I don't want things to take forever. And so for me, it's absolutely crucial to find experts in areas that I want to be great at, and then just work with them. It's absolutely, I couldn't speak for, again, it'd be probably awkward if I told you that I didn't believe in coaching, right? But I couldn't speak for it. I personally have at least 2 coaches at a given time. I just think it's crucial, because why not invest in yourself, and why not invest in speeding up the process? Because like at the end of the day, like life is short, and oftentimes, hopefully, your dreams are big. So just you gotta speed through it.
So I appreciate that answer, and I mean, that, which leads me to like, we're dealing with, we're in modern era, 21st century, everything's moving great. We had conversations earlier this year or in 2019, Q4 2019, like everything's growing, and this is going to happen, what's going to happen. So and you're coaching, and the coaching is growing, and boom, the pandemic hits. Like, how do you as a coach, when no one knows what the outcome is, no one knows when the pandemic's going to end, so how do you stay positive, and then reassure your clients, to really like still try to pursue climbing the mountain? Because I think there are a lot of people who had feelings of depression, or just down on themselves, or my business is messed up, furloughing and firing people feels like shit. So like, how do you maintain that inner strength for yourself, but then, and how much more do you need in order to, put that, into other people's minds and to reassure them?
Great question. So first and foremost, the concept of crisis is an entirely intellectual one. There are people that are making billions of dollars off of your panic, and the panic of the country. And we don't know, and there's a certain veil for where we know, kind of like following the money to where it goes and who's got their investments and everything like that. But suffice to say that this crisis is really big business for certain companies, certain individuals who are able to see the need, anticipate the need per se, and to kind of ride the wave. So those people are not looking at what's going on as a crisis. They're seeing it as a tremendous opportunity. And that goes across the board. 2008, you saw a huge amount of really successful tech companies took off. You'll see that some of the greatest billionaires were all minted coming out of the Depression, coming out of World War I, coming out of World War II. So the concept that, again, it has nothing to do with crisis. It has everything to do with the herd mentality, and that the people that are able to kind of rise above that and to kind of go into their own mind and to realize this is all just a matter of perception. I think those are the people that are able to take advantage of the situation and not really freak out. Is it an unprecedented situation? Again, I have 4 children, and we've, my littlest one has been in, it's been a very long time since we've had, it's just like a challenge of like, okay, keeping all 4 kids like engaged on a Sunday. And now it's like the whole time, and it's never going back. We have no idea. And of course it's a challenge, but the idea is to look at the opportunity to be very present with what you need. I mean, this is a Jewish concept, the Stoic concept. It's about being able to sit and be still, to be aware of where you are, what you need. All of the panic that we have, it's all about what's going to be in the future. We don't know, we can't affect that. All of the depression, all the frustration, if only I had moved my assets, a month ago, or if only I had sold the company or bought it, whatever it might be, there's nothing you can do about that either. So learning how to become, and this is something that I work on a lot. And it's interesting because I think it's absolutely crucial in the Instagram world, in the Facebook world, where everyone's trying to front about their success and everything like that. That's something that drives me absolutely crazy. I think you got to talk about what you're good at. And one thing that I've worked very hard on and continue to work very hard on is how I see myself and how I deal with my own pressure and stress. And so as someone that was always looking for someone to help, like a handout in the past, feeling unqualified, feeling kind of out of sorts, I've done a tremendous amount of work on accepting myself, loving myself, feeling like I can create my own success. And the pandemic only highlighted that. I jumped on the phone with my clients. I jumped on the phone with my partners. I jumped on the phone with my coaches. And I said, this is where we're going to rock it and take off. So I look at crisis and I say, what crisis? if you have a crisis, it's not because anything's going on in the outside world. It's all in your head. And again, go talk to Zoom about this crisis. Like Zoom's doing fantastic. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy. Go talk to the e-commerce companies. They can't keep stocking their stuff because it's just, I heard literally the e-commerce went from 2% to 20% in 1 month of business. People can't keep up with the demand. So it's like, what are you talking about? Like the business is going on and furlough, like it's even more important depending on the industry. So even if you're in an industry where things are difficult, or, again, I have a client that's in the live event space, right? So it's all about him as an entrepreneur. He has to appreciate where's the pivot, how do you pivot, and how do you keep that mindset of where's the opportunity?
So if I presented any challenge to you, you think there's a pivot to anything?
I think that there's a pivot to anything. Yeah. You're going to guess me.
No, I know. I meant no, because I'm thinking like there's definitely that entrepreneur or CEO out there who is like feeling really down on themselves, and to say like, or they're in the entertainment space, or they're in, again, live event space as the example you just gave, and to say like you can find opportunity. But I get the example. We had last week, we had one of our friends on, Alex Pollock, who runs Paradox Events worldwide, and he does event medical services, and they pivoted to helping with FEMA and to doing this. So I get it. It's just, it's sometimes difficult for people to see in the moment, but that's why coaching.
The problem, again, and you see everyone talks about this, but the last 10 years were so great that you had a lot of people who did very, very well. And it was because the market conditions were really, really favorable. And if you were able to invest in any kind of one of these, in so many different industries, that things went phenomenal. And also with the rise of social media and the, thanks to the, the David Meltzers and the Gary Vaynerchuks and, that entrepreneurship and this Shark Tank, and it became such a cool thing. I spoke with a mentor of mine who's been an entrepreneur for 35 plus years, and he's saying like at this time a lot of people are going to go out of business, a lot of really talented people are going to start working for somebody else, but the idea of seeing that a pivot is impossible, or that because again, and this is something that I speak a lot about and that I believe very much, it's like your business isn't your asset, you're the asset. Right. So the guy that could build a big business could build another big business. So yeah, obviously, like there are some industries that might not survive this. I saw just J. Crew just went bankrupt, I guess, today or something like that. Right. But the point is that the people who are qualified and capable of building an industry, you have to fall back on your mentors. You have to fall back on your team. You have to fall back on the people that you look into, and you can't accept defeat. I think that's the most important piece. And again, it's like Mike Tyson famously, who, again, also a phenomenal entrepreneur, and did a lot of pivots in his life. Mike Tyson was famous for saying, everyone's got a good plan until they get punched in the face. And then we'll get, okay, you get punched. But the best, I'll give you this piece, for me, the most amazing thing was I'm a Jewish kid, the very overprotective mother, and I never thought about fighting. But then I started fighting and I loved it. And then the first time I got punched in the face, it's a stunning feeling in a lot of ways. You get confused, at least I did. And not advocating this, especially as you get older, you have kids, like, be careful, for crying out loud. But the experience of saying, wow, I just got punched in the face and I'm going to get up and do it again. It's the same thing. You lose all your money, you figure out, okay, what am I going to do? We have so much fear around the worst case scenario. And in my own life and in the lives of clients, I've seen dark, and it's like, it's not that bad. Once you live through it, you figure out what to do and you keep going.
So I definitely appreciate that answer very much. I think that's very inspiring. I want to move on from, and I've definitely been hit in the face, and it definitely sucks, even with headgear, getting hit in the nose. But your nose looks pretty good.
Thank you.
It seems like it's intact. Or you cracked it back. I want to switch gears more, to family now, and then family balance with work. You're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're a coach, you're trying to run, a business from home. You have 4 kids. How do you balance, like on your good day, your partner or your wife might have a bad day, and vice versa. You have the added stresses of educating and entertaining your kids, 24/7. So how do you suggest or promote to everyone, ways, to get through that, to not, again, we're all in our relationships, we react, right? We get frustrated. So we take it out on the other person, in the relationship, and then things are out of whack and there's tension for no reason, when if we had just relieved some of the pressure and the frustration, it would have gotten past that. So like, what are your recommendations for that, or always being, conscious and mindful of that, so that, you're not exploding or taking your frustration or anger at the situation, the kids, work, balancing it all, something that's unprecedented, all these pressures that are unprecedented. How do you, prevent the explosions?
I think a couple of things. I think first of all, the idea of unprecedented, I think largely is kind of a misnomer. I think that we've seen in so many cases that it's the same thing within a company. If a company is not healthy, then this kind of turbulence will bring it to the forefront. If a company is healthy, the turbulence can survive. So there are certain relationships that are based on we don't see each other so much. And it's based on we go do our different things. And now we're stuck and we're having these really interesting conversations. I think a lot of people might panic and say, I didn't realize this demographic was present. But oftentimes the truth is that the demographic was present. You just weren't aware of it. So I think the most important thing first and foremost is to appreciate that this is not, the reaction is never healthy. And a person should first try to set up what are the established realities in your life. And again, there's no reason to lie or to hide or to be ashamed. If you and your spouse do not have effective communication, it's great to know that up front, because then when you're not effectively communicating, you're not like, oh my God, what's wrong with her? What's wrong with me? Whatever it might be. It's like, we don't know how to effectively communicate. So one thing that I think is absolutely crucial is to take a very real state of the union where the couple is. And if it's not good, don't pretend like it's good. And if there's trust issues, if there's a lack of honest communication, fine, own it, figure out what to do. Most cases, it's not necessarily about running to the therapist, to the coach. It's more just being able to authentically articulate yourself to your spouse, which is scary. And there's also a misnomer that the longer that you're together, the easier communication is. I venture to say it's the opposite. The more that you set your bedrock and you have your kids and your finances, whatever it might be, you never want to rock that boat. Famously speaking, though, that's usually when the relationship has the greatest risk of crumbling, because then it becomes like rote and becomes very uninteresting. And that's why you'll have people that have perfectly stable marriages who will act out, who will get caught with all kinds of stuff. And it's like, what happened? Everything was fine. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly the point. And so again, it's an opportunity in the sense that it creates a level of uncertainty in the relationship, which actually might be very helpful. It's also, and again, this is something that's very interesting because I was speaking to a group of women entrepreneurs, and they were saying that working now back in, again, usually it was like the nanny raised the kids, mom was out running her company, dad's out running his company, and now we're all together, the nanny can't come. And then there's this very interesting, almost societally endemic demographic where, the mom who never wanted to be like a stay-at-home mom, it's like the dad's like, well, you have to do it. And on the flip side, she's not able to articulate what she needs. All kinds of resentment happens under the surface. That's a fascinating problem, right? What do you do about that? And I think it ultimately comes back to authentic communication, right? She has to be able to say to herself, honey, I don't know where you got this thing, that it's okay, that, your work is more important than my work, but having that communication, and maybe, again, you cannot become a super person. And if that means the kids don't get the homework done, maybe the kids don't get the homework done. You basically have to figure out for yourself what's important, for your spouse what's important, and have those kind of real conversations. How do we both kind of put it together? Because I think that, again, there was a famous story about I'll save you the long story, but the bottom line is that these things turn lights on. And if you've been hiding in the dark for a long time, the lights are on now, and what's going on is going to become very clearly evident.
And then, so as a practical follow-up to that, you're locked in your horns with your spouse right now, because again, day in, day out, we're on 6 weeks, 7 weeks, however long it's been. What are a couple of practical takeaways that people, of how to disengage or, change the dynamic and walk away from that to get back to, because again, you said the lights are on, it's incumbent upon all of us to get back to that normal dynamic as soon as possible, because guess what? We're living together. I mean, we're stuck together, so I mean, obviously in the most extreme cases, there've been, some of our matrimonial clients have definitely seen an increase in business, but what are some real takeaways that people can use in their day-to-day right now during the pandemic?
First and foremost, the reason why you're fighting, it's your fault. I think that's the most important thing. It's your fault that you're fighting, because at the end of the day, you can always choose to desist. And usually the reason why you're fighting is because you have some kind of expectation that your partner was going to do something that they didn't necessarily do. And rather than getting upset about that, it's again, it's a stoic concept, but you want to come back to center as fast as possible and become clinical about it and not emotional about it. So oftentimes, again, you use the example, it's like, first responders and professionals and everything like that. They look at crisis and they calm down. They actually did studies on certain groups of soldiers, especially trained soldiers, and their heartbeat slows down as the action becomes more chaotic. So the idea of being able to check in with yourself and to acknowledge that you're super triggered at when you might be triggered, and then disassociate from that, and then take responsibility for the fact that the reason why you're triggered is your fault, not your spouse's fault. That's piece number one. Piece number two, which I think is absolutely crucial, which I found, which is amazing, is this idea of, and this is effective listening technique. There's an amazing book called Never Split the Difference by a guy named Chris Voss. And Chris Voss always talks about two techniques that work in communication. One is mirroring, and the other is called labeling, right? So if you have a hard time, if your spouse says to you something like, again, not that any man has ever heard this, but you never listen, and you're like, well, how the hell am I supposed to do that, right? So there's two techniques that Chris Voss talks about, which is very effective. Your wife will catch on to it eventually, but probably not. And the same is true with people in your office, whatever it might be, or your husband, right? It's you just repeat the last couple of words of what they just said, and then you can label it. So you say, for example, your wife might say, you're never there when I need you. So you mirroring, never there when you need me, and let her speak, and then label it. And you say, it must be very difficult to feel like I'm not present. As soon as a person feels heard, the interesting thing about that is that you haven't necessarily said anything, but the fact that a person can feel heard allows them to calm down, relax, and reconnect with you. So mirroring and labeling is an extremely effective thing. You don't have to come back and justify. Usually fights happen when there's justification. And if you feel like things are getting heated, right, switching into a listening mode is something that's very effective. The last piece I would say, which is very technical and clinical, is that when you need something from your spouse, ask, and then ask them if that's okay. Meaning, we oftentimes want our spouses to know exactly what we need them to do. And Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, Never Eat Lunch Alone, talks about how you have no idea what's going on in the minds of other people, even your spouse. So the idea that your spouse should sort of know, good luck with that. So then the flip side would be, honey, is it okay if you make dinner tonight, or, I have a call at such and such a time, I need to be undisturbed, right? You have to be able to articulate to articulate the need, and then ask them, is that okay? So articulating your needs and then getting their buy-in, I find is a very effective technique for marital success in this time.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. And those are some great takeaways. And again, I mean, everyone's dealing with this day to day. It's incredible. We've got a couple of minutes left. Tell us about, some books or, actually, before we dig into that, I just read a great quote from MJ23 from Michael Jordan, which is, timely considering, or apropos considering the docuseries that come out. It said, some want it to happen, some wish it could happen, and some make it happen. What does that mean to you?
Everything. I think that's the point, is that you can exert the same amount of energy on sitting back. I mean, that's really the crazy thing, right? There's another guy out there that has a phenomenal book. He's a big thought leader, Dr. Joel Dispenza, and he always talks about how the mind, again, and it's funny because this is like a very, very basic esoteric Jewish concept, that the mind, ultimately, we think it creates emotions, and that creates realities in our body. And so he has all these crazy things about how people can change their thoughts and then have very practical health things that change. I've seen personally, the more that I think about things and change things about how I show up, the more that opportunities pursue me instead of me pursuing opportunities. So what that means is that you can spend as much time thinking about something and hoping something will happen as you can spend actually making it happen. It's a little bit awkward in the beginning, but once you think about what am I accomplishing and actually start accomplishing that thing, you're kicking yourself, because you're like, if I could only have done this earlier, like what would my life have looked like? So again, you might not be Michael Jordan, and let's be honest, most of us aren't, but taking an active role, a brave and active role in creating the change that we want to see in our life, that's absolutely crucial, not just during COVID, that's absolutely crucial at all time. That's what that means.
I just personally experienced something like that myself. I mean, I wanted my podcast to happen for 2 years. I wished it would happen and someone else would do it, so I didn't have to put myself out there. But thank you for being here and making me,
So tell me, just to talk a little bit about what's that experience like, actually doing something you've wanted to do for 2 years?
I mean, I think it's it feels good. I mean, having, completely, cards up on the table, having some technical difficulties early on was definitely frustrating because I knew that we, had great guests such as yourself and good content. So that was frustrating, but the execution part has been great. My team's amazing. They got behind me, having great conversations with, with amazing entrepreneurs, coaches, leaders, and just regular people who are on the front lines, like is exceptionally inspiring. I think the timing was perfect to do it because of the amazing stories and because of this just like rock the boat, world that we're living in right now. But it feels great.
Again, just tell everyone, because people want to know. They say, what does my voice matter? It's like, great, congratulations, you're going on Facebook Live. You and every other person on earth, but like, speak about that piece specifically for everyone.
I mean, to me, it's important. Like I enjoy having great conversations with entrepreneurs and leaders, and I think it's important to, we're a public relations firm. HeraldPR is a public relations firm. We have certain clients, certain relationships we can, tell, a minimum, we help tell those stories, and that's what we do, and we do it very effectively. But, I like, and I'm curious and interested in many other people's stories, and I think it's, that might not get, the cover of the Wall Street Journal or to be on Fox or CNN or, not giving away any political leanings there. I think it's really important to share stories. And I think that this time, it was an opportune time because of, Corona. And it's something that, like, as my wife, Daniela reminds me all the time, I consider her one of my coaches. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I want to go to the store. I want to do this. I want to do this business venture. I want to launch this thing, but we're all sitting at home. It's global in no other thing that anyone my age or your age or any generation since the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic has experienced. Like, we're all home. Like, we all have to experience this together. And there's, and so I think, opening things up during that time is, was why I was inspired to do it.
Outstanding. And you would say, though, that it's worth it to just get going and just start doing it for people.
Yeah, you gotta, I have to pay attention to my 4-month-old more. And, one little roll over and one crawl or one little foot in front of the other, one step in front of the other. And,
baby steps, you're saying baby steps are important, but then go out and actually do what you want.
Exactly.
And be patient, because it's going to suck in the beginning, which is what you said. And that's great.
You're taking over my podcast, man.
Sorry, I'm done.
I'm kidding. I'm joking. Leave us with some inspiring words. Some of the books you've been reading, some of the things that have inspired you during the quarantine. And I want to know, like, what's is it Lift Your Legacy? What's the domain that everyone should check you out at?
Sure. liftyourlegacy.live. Okay. I have a podcast on Spotify and Apple called Lift Your Legacy with Rabbi Jacob Rupp. I interview business leaders, spiritual leaders, health leaders, whatever it might be. I would love to add value for anyone who got anything out of this. Please, don't hesitate, reach out, find me. It should be fairly simple. I hope I've worked hard that it's simple. Jacob Rupp. What have I been focusing on during this time? I read a lot, and I have a lot of great books. Thank God that keep me busy. What's hot right now? So again, as I mentioned, Becoming Supernatural by Dr. Joe Dispenza. That's what's currently, that's what I was just reading yesterday. There's an amazing book called Your Unique Ability by Dan Sullivan, who runs the Strategic Coach model. Absolutely. Another great book, which I'm sure everyone's read, but should be, which you should not overlook because it's a classic, is Traction by Gino Wickman, the EOS method.
Read that last year. Yeah.
Yeah, that one. Yeah. So there's so many. I mean, Never Split the Difference. We cited that one already. Yep. What else? Anything by Robert Greene is phenomenal. I could go on. Jordan Peterson, obviously the master there. So there's no shortage of great stuff out there, and just get started as I think is kind of the theme here of the discussion.
Absolutely. Rabbi, Coach, I really appreciate you joining me. I wish you an easy rest of the quarantine, and I hope that you can be inspired so that you can inspire others. And again, thank you so much for taking the time on this Monday night.
You keep doing a great job. It's fantastic to watch. You're very excited.
Thanks, man. Talk to you.